Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Loretta Garcia. I'm a member of the Contemporary Issues Forum, and I'll be introducing the upcoming session and today's program. And just a reminder, as we periodically do, if you have suggestions for speakers or topics, feel free to contact any of us, Kim or Carl Weichel, myself, Loretta Garcia, Dale Miller Hill, Aidan Jones, Don Cherry, Jan Polisar. Rob Neuter and John Nowick are our committee members. The upcoming session on March 27th is on Seeking Spirituality in Nature. The speaker will be Reverend Sarah Anders, who is an ordained minister and spiritual leader at the Wild Earth Spiritual Community. She will speak to us about living in relationship with the natural world, and her congregation has many levels of spiritual connection, including silent meditation, drumming, and communing with nature in the outdoors. Today's program is the speakers are Kim Weichel and Carl Weichel, who are longtime members of River Road and who currently teach in the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at American University on a number of topics. Today, they're going to be speaking about what we have learned in the pandemic and how we are changing emotionally, socially, and spiritually. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Kim Weichel and Carl Weichel. Oh, and also, if you can post your questions in the chat box, we will be pulling those questions off. Today's session will be in 3 segments, and we'll take questions at the end of each segment.
Well, thank you, Loretta, and welcome everybody. So we've selected 3 of the 10 themes from our recent book that we thought would be of most interest to our audience today. The book, Uncovering New Possibilities, was sparked by my curiosity about what this time of an extended lockdown and social upheaval is teaching us and how these lessons might shape our future. Since I believe that in every crisis, there's also opportunity, I find it helpful to focus on new possibilities and what changes that we as individuals and our society need to address. I take a deeper look at what we're learning now and what we hope might emerge. Will we have changed or merely endured? There is so much to be learned emotionally and spiritually by digging into our experiences. What will be the legacy of this extraordinary time? In many ways, it feels like we're going through a spiritual crisis in our country. People have found themselves to be too close to life's deeper questions about how we live and how we make meaning of our short time here on Earth. For some, the challenges of this past 2 years has birthed an awakening. The process of reflection is just beginning, and where it takes us remains to be seen. I concur with others that with the many fissures in our society, from political polarization to racial and economic inequality, what is needed is to heal the soul of America. This book focuses on how we can begin to do that. So some questions that we explored in the book, which offer an opportunity for reflection. What have we learned about ourselves during the long period of isolation? Do we view our lives in a different way now? What might we do differently as things open up? Will anything change the way we interact with others?
Sure.
Are we engaging more with our neighbors and communities? And will we have different priorities for our future? So these are all questions to ponder. So the first theme today, as Loretta says, we have 3 themes, is the lessons and new possibilities from our time. So the life-altering crisis of this pandemic naturally inspires speculation about what will change and how it will change us. The pandemic has highlighted the need for effective leadership that moves quickly to respond to any virus or threat, relying on health and science experts with the ability to take bold action. It also highlighted weak links in our society, such as the need for a national sick leave policy, for healthcare not tied to employment, and for national family leave policies. We are learning to live with uncertainty and ambiguity and developing a sense of resilience. Resilience is the ability to respond to adversity and is one of the most important predictors of one's success in life. The pandemic has helped us reevaluate what is important in our lives and put things in a new perspective. Our priorities that seemed important before do not matter as much now when faced with life and death issues. So we examine the impact on some key sectors during the pandemic, asking some bigger questions. And given time today, we can only touch on a few. So on the positive side, with less traffic and many industries dormant, it resulted, at least temporarily, in cleaner air, clearer water, reduction in carbon emissions, and less pollution, with fewer cars and trucks on the road and less domestic and international travel. People in Beijing said they could see blue skies for the first time. Yet will this spur us into positive, disciplined, and sustained action? The virus greatly affected minorities, particularly people of color. Blacks were dying at a rate 2.4 times higher than whites. Native Americans and Latinos were dying at about 1.5 times the rate of whites and Asian Americans. Additionally, the economic fallout from the pandemic hit families of color particularly hard. Besides subsidies, what structural changes will we make to promote greater economic equality? The virus disproportionately impacted women. Women accounted for 81% of the jobs lost in the education and health sectors and experienced 61% of retail job losses. Many of these women held some of the lowest paying jobs. Unfortunately, the pandemic wiped out the job gains women made over the past decade. Mothers gave up jobs to take care of children learning at home. Many women are financially worse off than before the pandemic began. Many workers are now leaving low-paying, high-stress jobs with long, inconvenient hours and seeking better opportunities. Many restaurants, stores, airlines, and factories are short-staffed, affecting services and supply chains. School districts are relying on substitutes because there are many teachers who have left the field. The implications of this shift could be long-lasting and problematic. The framework of aging in America needs to be rethought. The virus toll in nursing home facilities revealed many weak links, such as understaffed, low pay and long hours, and poorly regulated. And it has underscored the urgency of re-examining the prevailing model of senior care. As baby boomers age, the elderly population in America is set to double over the next 20 years, and federal, state, and local governments are not prepared. The good news is that options are expanding, such as village networks that support elders aging at home. Higher education has been negatively affected. Colleges and universities already experience decreased enrollment because of lower birth rates, but now a decline in foreign enrollment and an acceleration of online learning questions the future direction of many colleges. This trend mostly challenges state universities, community colleges, and small liberal arts colleges. The high cost of a college education is being questioned when student debt can average over $100,000 and a degree does not mean job placement. Supporting more technical and trade work skills at community college is being reformatted. Unfortunately, many K-12 students have fallen behind during remote learning, and there are concerns they will not catch up, particularly in science, math, and reading. A study showed that reading literacy is down dramatically. It has been most acute for kids from low-income families lacking adequate technology, expanding the digital divide. There are concerns that mental health trends could worsen among young people, including the trauma of homelessness, hunger, and isolation, and we may see an epidemic of post-traumatic stress disorder. Our schools, teachers, and mental health professionals will need to find creative and effective ways to deal with these concerns. Religious institutions are being affected and will need to re-envision how they operate. For decades, many churches have experienced declining participation, which has been exacerbated during the pandemic when they were not able to meet in person. Now, fewer people are attending in person or virtual services with reduced pledges, which makes it challenging to keep staff, pay the mortgage, and maintain the building. People may get out of the routine of going to church, and churches will need to rethink how they more effectively grow their communities in a new landscape. And this, of course, includes RRUUC. There will be many shifts in corporate America. Companies are revising their policies about remote working since productivity from telework almost matches on-site working. They are evaluating expensive office leases, and commercial real estate will certainly change. One unexpected benefit is that many workers who enjoyed working from home are saving commute times of 1 to 2 hours per day. Companies may reduce full-time work in future to under 30 hours per week to reduce benefits. So what will be the impact on public transportation as more people telework? What will happen to empty office buildings if companies allow their staff to work remotely? One proposal that I've read is to turn empty to low occupancy office buildings into affordable housing. But who will pay for this? So how will domestic and international travel be affected? Corporate travel is expected to be only half of what it has been, as virtual meetings have become very efficient and economical. Airlines will reduce flight schedules as high-fare business travel declines. Hotels in major urban centers that have closed may not reopen due to fewer high-paying business travelers. Personal travel may also be reduced, as some may be hesitant to travel with fears of contracting a virus and other uncertainties. So with the comfort and convenience of home-based work, delivered groceries, and endless home entertainment options, will the American lifestyle be irreversibly altered? Theater and live music concerts have been dramatically affected, with many being canceled, and musicians and actors were unable to find gigs. However, the lights out on theater stages have steered some companies in directions they never imagined. The programming shift to digital, film, stage productions, and live Zoom readings has spurred creative alternatives. An ongoing issue of concern is expanded electronic surveillance by governments and corporations during the pandemic. Data capture is being used to monitor our personal lives during this virus, yet as citizens, we must redefine acceptable levels of usage once the crisis ends. For example, citizens were outraged when they learned the IRS was going to require facial recognition to access our online account, and the practice was quickly curtailed. We must be vigilant. So the pandemic has negatively affected many civil society organizations, or NGOs. This includes education and training, health services, temporary shelters, human rights assistance, and other essential services. How will we compensate for lost services? There are many larger questions. Just weeks ago, we presumed the pandemic had weakened America's leadership role with our alliances, and our foreign aid and emergency relief programs were diluted. Yet now, with the war in Ukraine, we're seeing a paradigm shift back to greater cooperation. Will this remain? So in future, should we face another pandemic, will we be emotionally and spiritually better prepared to navigate through it? So with that, we're just going to look to the audience now and see if there are a few comments or questions before we go on to the second theme. So Loretta, were there any comments or questions in the chat?
I don't see any in the chat. If you have one, you're welcome to raise your hand and unmute your mic, and you can ask it that way.
One or two questions? Or comments. Perhaps you see it differently. We try to keep up to date with all of the current trends as we're seeing them, which of course keep changing. Yes, Dale.
How do you, given all that dire news you gave, how do you explain the trumpeted increase in jobs? Is that because the base was very low?
Well, actually, again, in America, we have this clear belief that every time a new president comes in, they're the steward of this economic ship, and it's their policies. But in fact, as we even learned back in the Bill Clinton era, his economic boom was really started 4 to 8 years beforehand. So that being said, this has been a positive structural side for the economy that's been taking place. On the other hand, with a massive amount of federal support in the pandemic relief, that sustained what could have been a catastrophic collapse in our economy. That is just, we'll be paying for that later, and that will show up in some later time. But that allowed it, including many around in DC who did get the benefit of even the nonprofits to keep alive, including churches like River Road.
Yeah, I think personally the jobs numbers, as an economist, I think the jobs numbers need to be analyzed in a very different way, not in a simplistic way, because there is a structural shift going on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
as we know, there are more, the highest category of workers now are retail workers. And in that category, the majority of those work 30 hours or under each week because the employers don't want to pay benefits, et cetera. And if you look, if there should be some, what is the average or the mean and median salaries in America, then would that in fact really be showing as strong as total employment? As you say, you should really look in detail.
Yeah, underemployment may be
Yeah.
underreported.
Yeah, now, and as I mentioned, I'm really concerned about companies hiring back at under 30 hours so they don't have to pay benefits, which could greatly also impact women. Loretta, was there another question?
No, I don't see any additional questions.
Well, there'll be time at the end, unless is there another comment or question before we go on to the second theme?
Well, I guess I'm not sure if you're going to address what it's done to the medical profession, but I'd be interested to know, what you see for the future in that profession. They've gone to visual appointments and things like that, but obviously that can only take us so far.
They say we're not specialists in that, but that is one interesting positive side for those who are lucky enough to have a medical provider that has already been digitized, like we are in the DC area with a group health plan. For instance, we're in Kaiser. And although we could have tele-appointments before the pandemic, even we've seen Kaiser improve their capabilities and managing many more appointments more efficiently in that way. And ultimately, we, the consumers, in fact, Kim and I are on Kaiser, but also Medicare. The satisfaction we've had that we're now comfortable having more appointments done remotely is better for the whole country. But I know I have a brother who lives in Eastern Pennsylvania, where he has single providers that aren't digitized. It is still, they have actually been precluded from a normal balanced services because a lot of the doctor's offices were limiting their own appointments because of fear of people contaminating. So it's very mixed.
And I don't know, Loretta, whether this whole pandemic experience will encourage more people to become nurses and doctors or discourage because of the incredible stress on them and the pain of seeing their patients die, et cetera. And yet I think for some people that they've felt a calling to help out. So the jury is out whether it's going to encourage or discourage more professionals to go into the field. I don't know if you've seen anything on that.
One other comment, and we mentioned about the fate of religious institutions. The general trend in the last 20 years has been less attendance. Now, with churches quickly going over to the Zoom format and now more sophisticated webinars combined with Zoom, even in today's, literally at church, when we can be sitting at home and getting fulfilled. In fact, we were in Mexico in January, and 2 Sunday mornings we sat in our bed an hour later watching church, and we were connected. And now, without the pandemic, that would not have been a reality. Now, the hybrid model of both live and Zoom need to be done to satisfy our extended community, which is positive, I think.
So we're going to go on to theme 2, but there'll be time later on to come back to, ask more questions. So Carl is going to, there you go.
So theme number 2 is exploring our hidden brain, how our emotions shape our decisions. The pandemic has ignited deeper emotions and feelings, some of which we hadn't really dealt before. For decades, Kim and I have been intrigued with neuroscience, the brain, and its core relationships with emotions and behavior. And then several years ago, right in DC, we had learned that was a weekly NPR program called The Hidden Brain. So we tuned in and we were intrigued by a range of insightful topics focusing on how our emotions influence our life's major decisions and choices. So the show is hosted by Shankar Vedantam. I think many of you may have heard him. It's been going on since 2012. And then he also wrote a book that he coined the hidden brain term to identify the hidden forces that influence us in everyday life. So we decided to develop a course at Ali based on this. And it was quite a nice experience how the NPR team welcomed us in and shared the background and some of the research to give us some confidence to go forward in this course. So in essence of his theme is our inbuilt emotional systems and unconscious patterns are shaped from birth and affect our lives until we understand them and then learn how to reprogram. We've learned that our hidden brain can cause us to make the same errors over and over, unaware of their long-term influence. For example, we may unconsciously sabotage the job interview because of past warnings not to achieve more than our sibling did. Do things we really don't intend to do because the past family issues hurt us, or limit our choices in selecting a life partner because of unconscious biases? Many have had friendships dissolve, and we place the blame on the other, only to find the pattern reseeding itself in our future relationships. Since these are unconscious patterns, they can run our lives until we need to do the hard work to uncover them. We talk about how the brain is hardwired by evolution. There are new theories about how the left and right hemispheres are divided into halves, working together with neural networks passing information back and forth. They present two different views of reality. And just recently, a British neuroscientist, Dr. Ian McGilchrist, has come up with a new theory that's kind of shaking the whole field of neurobiology. So let's go in and play that short audio clip, Kim.
Ian argues that the right hemisphere of the brain is supposed to play the role of the wise master of our mental kingdom. The left hemisphere is supposed to be the emissary. Ian says we have grown infatuated with the skills of the emissary. We prize the details, but scorn the big picture. He makes an analogy about the relationship between the hemispheres.
I want to emphasize that I resist very strongly the idea that the brain is a computer. It's just nothing like a computer, actually. But in this one limited sense, the left hemisphere is a little bit like a very, very smart computer. So you know what the data that you've collected mean, but you haven't yet been able to analyze them. You put them into a machine that is just very clever at carrying out a routine. It doesn't understand. And then it spews out a result, which it also doesn't understand, but you then take back into the world where the data come from and go, I see. So that is the relationship. Your left hemisphere is busy processing things to make sure they're consistent and unpacked, but your right hemisphere is seeing everything. I'm suggesting that we have arrived at a place, not for the first time in the West, where we have slipped into listening only to what it is that the left hemisphere can tell us and discounting what the right hemisphere could have told us.
On narrow details, the right on general vigilance. To use a basketball analogy, the left hemisphere is focused on the mechanics of dunking the basketball. The right on where all the players are, the current situation in the game. One sees the small picture, the other the big picture. You see something similar when it comes to language.
Language has many components. One of them is attending to the tone of voice in which I say something. For example, I can say yes, or I can say yes. I can intone that in probably a dozen different ways with quite different meanings. So, for example, I say, it's a bit hot in here. You, using your right hemisphere, know that what I mean is, could we have the door open? Could we put on the air conditioning? But your left hemisphere is wondering, meanwhile, why I'm supplying this quite unnecessary meteorological information.
So it's really focused on sort of the granular detail.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because of this, all kinds of things happen. Because of its narrow focus, it doesn't see anything that isn't explicit. It only sees what's right in the center of the focus of attention. And it doesn't understand things that are not said. Often that's as important as what is said. The way in which it is said, my facial expression, my body language, all of this is lost, as well as the interpretation in the whole picture.
Okay, that was a longer clip, so we just cut it short. We could recommend that book, One Head, Two Brains. It's a bestseller, and it reads very well like his speaking voice. So as Dr. McGilchrist explains, the right hemisphere focuses on the big picture, while the left focuses on details. They work independently of each other, but also are integrated. Our basic language, words and sentences, is structured mainly in the left, but our rich literary metaphor and narrative like poetry is processed in the right. Our core emotions like anger and fear reside in the left, while nuanced ones like grief and love operate from the right. So his theory is really pretty revolutionary in debunking that old long-term theory about the distinct regions of the left and the right brain. So now let's take a look at this lotus style graphic showing the wide range of emotions. Psychologist Robert Plutchik was early pioneer of the study of the emotions in the 1980s with his theory of the 8 basic emotions. And many theories exist about how many, but usually the core range between 6 and 8, depending upon the social scientist. When looking at this lotus image, you see these 8 prime emotions revolving around the center core. These include fear, anger, sadness, joy, disgust, trust, surprise, and anticipation, which hold the intense extreme root of each, as they radiate outwards to the more layered and complex ones like love and optimism. These basic emotions can function as building blocks, with more complex emotions being blends of these basic 8. Now, on facial expressions, we can observe the prime emotions through people's facial expressions, which are common across most cultures. Paul Ekman staged the first cross-cultural studies in the 1960s in the USA, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil, asking people to match facial expressions with his 6 different emotions, which they constantly did. As you can see here, happy, surprise, fear, anger, sadness, and contempt. This indicates that emotions are biologically innate, universal to all humans, are displayed through common facial expressions. Now, on to sleep, which is such an important part of our everyday life. Our resting nocturnal brain also influences our emotional life. The amount and quality of our sleep can play a huge role in our mental health. Sleep is not a static state. There are different brain states. REM, or rapid eye movement, is when brain waves look active. During this stage, we dream more actively. It's associated with the development of consciousness and learning. Then there's non-REM, is when the brain waves are slower and less associated with dreaming. This is a restorative time when our brains can be cleansed from toxins and our immune systems regulated. There is now an epidemic of insomnia and sleep apnea, which is connected with the rise in obesity and may also be associated with dementia. Our genetics also influence how much sleep we need. In this chapter, we discuss the connections between positive and negative emotions and how each serves a different purpose. Positive emotions include empathy and compassion. Empathy is the ability to care about and understand the physical, mental, or emotional pain of another. Compassion involves allowing ourselves to be moved by the suffering and desire to help alleviate and prevent suffering. An act of compassion is defined by its helpfulness. There are negative emotions as well. Envy is a tool for social comparison and can be either benign or malicious. It's generally an unflattering emotion, yet it's universal. Benign envy is wanting what someone else has and resenting them for having it. Malicious envy, on the other hand, called Schadenfreude in German, is when someone takes joy in someone else's misfortune, hoping they will fail. One example is Martha Stewart's downfall and jail time after a long and successful public career. We included other topics on emotion and behavior. We explored the complex web of honesty and dishonesty in lying. While some people choose to lie for deeper psychological reasons, many of us tell white lies just to save face or be polite. For example, saying when we like someone's outfit or haircut, rather than telling our true, candid inner feeling. Avoiding vital information is another. Why do some people avoid vital information about their health or finances and postpone facing reality until it's too late? Called the ostrich effect, some people choose to avoid information that they subliminally feel might threaten their sense of well-being or happiness. We discuss a growing troublesome trend happening with older men in America. The popular NPR podcast, The Lonely American Male, explains that the male bonding opportunities like bowling, poker nights are diminishing, and it seems harder for men to develop meaningful relationship with other males. Many have relied on their wives or partners to schedule social activities, and after divorce or death, they struggle to make friends on their own. This often goes back to their upbringing as boys, that when we were raised to be strong, independent, and competitive, while avoiding expressing emotions naturally. This also relates down to the breakdown of our traditional support systems. In recent decades, there have been pervasive worries that Americans are spending less time with one another and that the ties that once bound communities have started to fray. Many are opting away from marriage, getting divorced, and going it alone. When we do connect, it's often done electronically. Too many of us spend increasing amounts of time hunched over our phones while ignoring those sitting around us. Health studies have shown that when we have warmer, closer relationships, we live longer and have fewer diseases. Understanding the complex web of influences within our hidden brain can help reduce our long-standing patterns that help get it in our way. Understanding this and doing the inner work ideally will help us lead happier and richer lives. Now, let's take a few questions and comments from our audience, and then we can have a discussion.
Again, I don't see any in the chat. If you have a question, please raise your
Question
hand.
or comment, we'd love to hear from you. This is again based on a class that Paul and I teach at the Lifelong Learning Institute at American University. We've learned a lot. So it looks like Mary Lou has a question. If you want to unmute. You'll have to unmute.
Are you still teaching the class at Ollie, and when is it?
Yes, well, we did it last fall, and we will do it again online. And right now we're teaching one, our cultural complexities. But if you want to email us, we'd be happy to send you, we have a study guide that over the 8 weeks of 90-minute classes, we'd be happy just to share with you this for your own reading.
This just touched the surface. So we gained a lot of insight in doing this research. It was fascinating. Did you have any other questions, Mary Lou?
No, I just wanted to know when the class was. I haven't taken any Ollie classes yet, so I was thinking of looking into that.
Yeah, you could actually, they've just started last week. You could go online and still sign up for courses, and many, there's still 7 to 9 left. So you did it.
Are there other questions or comments from what you heard about the hidden brain? Or I don't know if you listened to the radio series that Shankar Vedantam posts.
All righty.
Well, then we can go on to theme 3 if there aren't any questions. So the third and last theme is called Wisdom of the East. So it's 1 second here.
That's still itch up there.
Mm-hmm.
So the pandemic has created time and space for deeper reflection and cultivating our spirituality. Carl and I have had a long-standing interest in spirituality, natural healing methods, and ancient philosophies, which led us to explore the wisdom traditions of the East. Carl teaches an Ollie course on Eastern thought. Wisdom from both the West and East bring different teachings. The West emphasizes individual experience, while in the East, the collective experience is paramount. The East has a priority on natural health and wellness. Their integrative approach addresses stress points and uses natural herbal medicines with meditation and yoga to circulate the energy. We uncovered that their spiritual practice of empathy and compassion goes back to Buddha and Confucius around 500 BCE. Americans began to embrace Eastern thought and traditions during the First World Parliament of Religions held in Chicago in 1893 that introduced Zen Buddhism and Hinduism. Since then, there has been a growing fascination with Eastern philosophies and lifestyles. Today, teaching yoga is a standard in many schools. Zen was a natural first entree because of its lack of pretense and dogma that appealed to the Western mind. Additionally, Many precepts of Hinduism, including meditation, karma, Ayurveda healing, and reincarnation, have entered our mainstream American vernacular. By instilling the spirituality of empathy, Eastern sages and prophets ask people to abandon egotism, greed, violence, and unkindness. They say people should not speak a hostile word or make an irritable gesture, and that you should not limit your benevolence to your own clan, rather share with every person. So we found great wisdom in the core principles of Buddhism, especially the understanding of harmony and balance. The Buddha set out on a lifelong quest to discover why his material wealth and family comforts left him unfulfilled. His journey taught him much about the human condition of suffering and compassion. After a decade-long journey, he found deep inner happiness and contentment, commonly referred to as enlightenment. He believed that each of us can attain enlightenment through discipline, commitment, and practicing of kindness. One of the earliest activities Buddha established was the Buddhist Sangha, or community. Strikingly radical for the time, their communities were purposely diverse, including people from all castes as well as women. The Buddha was inviting us to explore what it means to awaken in community that is a prime practice of collective meditation. So Buddhists consider the Dharma, or teachings of the Buddha, as the spiritual path to freedom. At the core of Buddhism are the four noble truths, which are the embodiment of his teachings. 1, there is suffering in the world we all experience. 2, the origin of suffering comes from craving and attachment. 3, our life's journey is to seek freedom from suffering. And 4, the path to end suffering is through the Eightfold Path by being an ethical person. So the Buddhist Eightfold Path toward freedom is grouped into 3 basic divisions: wisdom, wise understanding and wise intention; ethical behavior, wise speech, wise action, and wise livelihood; meditation, wise effort, wise mindfulness, and wise concentration. So the Eightfold Path supports development of our happiness and freedom. The ultimate goal of enlightenment is to cease our cycles of rebirth on earth that will then lead toward ultimate happiness.
Now, continuing on, the book we covered Sikhism, and a little background about Sikhism, that it emerged in the late 1400s in northern India through the prophet Guru Nanak. As a culture-based religion that evolved and deepened, it became in the late 1700s the most recent of the world's great religions. This independent faith combines the positive traits of both Islam and Hinduism. One core tenet of Sikhism is mysticism, a belief that the universe is and always will be a mystery. Some form of mysticism is found in almost every religion. It is a longing for an intimate communion with the divine. The written work, The Nature of Man, describes advanced views on natural sentience or consciousness that preceded the field of psychology in over 400 years. It outlines the Sikh prescient teachings that a human mind consists all of our body's senses and connected to a universal cosmic mind or consciousness. In The Nature of Man, the mind is merely one key component that makes us human. These 5 components are matter, life, mind, intelligence, and self. Now, on to Jainism, that evolved from the ancient wisdom of Hindu philosophy. It's known that every ending is also a beginning. Infinity is where everything is continual and energy never ends. Another key precept is karma and soul, first introduced by the Jains in northern India. In Jainism, they believe that the soul is real, unchanging, but not personal or characteristic. All souls are equal and embodied in sentient and non-sentient creatures. In their pure state, souls have perfect perception, knowledge, happiness, and power. Jains believe karma is a material substance made of fine particles that cling to the soul. When a soul acts, it attracts these particles, which adhere to it, weigh it down, and stain it with a particular color, according to the karma's moral and spiritual quality. Karma determines one's future births and keeps humans in bondage to the material samsaric world. Jain philosophies have had a tremendous influence on Indian history and its many religions. Karma is an important precept in most Indian religions, which is a cycle of cause and effect. It is essence. Karma refers to both the actions and the consequences of the actions. Importantly, karma is not a predetermined event, nor is karma beyond our personal influence. Another key tenet of Jainism is adhering to nonviolence. Nonviolence is known as the use of peaceful means, not force, bring about political or social change. Jainism has had a tremendous influence on the practice of ahimsa or harmlessness, similar to Buddhism. Jains believe that everything around them had a life force and that each human being, as well as animals, have a soul. If they avoided violence in their current existence, they could be reborn. They believe that the peace comes from within, which is both a deeply spiritual concept and a practical one, since practicing peace is self-healing. Ahimsa was the comprehensive and included not only refraining from lying, but also that speech should be deliberate and controlled without unkindness or impatience. Jains had to cultivate an attitude of positive benevolence, believing that all living creatures should help and be interconnected with all. And one little point there, the Jains who are pictured historically and even today wearing a mask. Now that wasn't in any way to prevent a pandemic, but in fact, so that their own breath would not go out and contaminate our atmosphere. Mahatma Gandhi was a firm believer in nonviolence and other Jain practices. According to Gandhi, violence harms the perpetrator as well as the victim. Gandhi imagined a world without violence, but he was realistic enough to know that it was unlikely to happen soon. In the meantime, he said, we must learn how to fight better. Gandhi fought against bigotry and injustice and worked to change the way we fight by using active and persistent nonviolence. Gandhi felt it is not enough to reject violence. Rather, we must find creative ways to convert our adversaries into friends. Most violence, he felt, stems not from an immoral impulse, but a failure of our own imagination. He felt that a violent person is a lazy person. There are many ancient writings about spirituality that intertwine ethical and political beliefs. One Eastern precept that captivates us is about living in harmony with nature is the Dao De Jing, or also known as the Dao De Jing, an ancient book written by a Chinese sage, Lao Tzu. The twofold nature of Tao, also known as the path or the way, helps explain a paradox of bridging stability with change that runs throughout the Dao De Jing. At times, Tao is said to be stable, eternal, and consistent. And at other times, the Tao becomes the source of change. However, there is also a universal dimension that is identified as the primordial Tao that is both. Tao is the power to underline yin and yang, and neither can exist without the other. Each contains the seeds of the other. This relationship of duality accounts for the phenomena of change, each giving rise to the other. Now let's watch a short video about the Yin and Yang Theory.
The concept of yin yang was first found in the Book of Changes, dating back to about 700 BC. Back then, it was a combination of broken and unbroken lines, but today we all know it as this symbol. While almost everybody recognizes this as a yin yang symbol, most people don't really know what it stands for and that it's a theory in Chinese medicine. So let's start with the basic explanation. These are the Chinese yin yang characters. The first character can be divided in two separate characters, with one representing a hill and the other representing a cloud. The second character represents the sun and its rays of light. Thus, both characters combined represent the idea of a hill, with yin being the shady side and yang being the sunny side. And that's where the light and dark color in the symbol come from. Now, let's explore this idea a little further. If the shady side is yin and the sunny side is yang, then nighttime must be yin and daytime must be yang. Rest is yin, activity is yang, the moon is yin, the sun is yang, and so on. In fact, everything in life can be brought down to yin or yang. Although yin and yang are opposites, they also transform into each other, which is reflected in the well-known symbol. Night will always become day, winter will always become summer, and activity is always followed by rest. Now, put in a Chinese medicine perspective, one can say that every philosophical process and every symptom or sign can be brought back to this Yin Yang theory. And all diseases and treatment strategies will boil down to one of these four. Either someone has a lack of yin or yang energy, and thus yin or yang should be tonified, or someone has too much yin or yang energy, in which case the excess should be eliminated. One can say, without yin yang, there is no Chinese medicine. So understanding this theory and applying it in practice is therefore of supreme importance.
Now, for those of you,
Not sure why you're getting an echo. We do have one
sorry.
question if you're ready for questions.
yeah, well, hold that question, and it might say there anybody's more interested in Taoism and the blending of duality and finding the middle path. There's unlimited video sources on YouTube and elsewhere. So there are many more pearls of wisdom in the East, Eastern thought, such as the discipline of Feng Shui, which is a Taoist practice of looking at our living spaces and working environment, then striking a balance with our structures to the natural world. We admire their commitment to family and community. In many ways, Western culture has become so focused on freedom and growth of the individual that has led us to a growing sense of isolation. We in America hunker for a deepened community, especially as our nuclear families have been breaking apart through relocation and lifestyles. Reverence for the family and community remain primarily in the Eastern cultures. Humility is a core attribute in many of their cultures. The Eastern focus on being humble is in many ways counter to our culture that supports self-promotion. We appreciate their reverence for elders, where they are treated with honor and respect. Elders are considered wise, and gratitude is given 7 generations after their passing. We are saddened that our elders in the West are not treated with a similar respect. In sum, through our decades of studying and exploring Eastern thought, we still have only scratched the surface about the wisdom of ancient Eastern traditions. We have learned to live more fully each day, develop a greater appreciation of balance and harmony in nature, and continually search for new lessons in the mystery of the unknown. And especially during this COVID period, Kim and I would work hard to practice many of their traditions. So now let's go into a gal review, and then we can take some questions and share other comments about this topic or everyone else.
Okay, great. We have one question in the chat box. What is the samastic world?
The samsaric world. The
Samsaric.
samsaric world is that life is a continual cycle of life, death, rebirth, life, re-death, and rebirth. And in the general principle of the Buddha, the way he explained it, is only after we've lived our life many times and we've learned from each time, then can we go on into a period of not needing to come back to Earth. Now, different Eastern thoughts have different perspectives of reincarnation, including in the Judaism and Christian sides of it, they address it. But the general force is life is never, energy is never created or diminished. It is always there.
Hopefully that answered the question. Other thoughts, comments, questions? Love to hear from you.
Yes, Christina.
I
Go
love
ahead.
that part, especially about reverence for your elders.
Indeed, it's very important, and it's so true in many Asian cultures. I wished it were more here.
All right, so you've given us an enormous amount of information, but I just wonder if you could take a moment to reflect what you've experienced in your own lives about the pandemic. What has been positive about it, and what has been negative? Because I think that's what we're doing with this session today was looking at the changes in our post-pandemic world, because many of us have been severely challenged, probably deeply changed. So I'm wondering how you have, what you've experienced and how you think you've changed or changed in the people that you hang out with.
Christina, since you're a fellow OLLI teacher and student, I'd like to share that perspective, which somewhat overlaps into our River Road community. In the last 2 years, as we've gone through the cycle of hopefully in 3 months after March 20, we would be back in these cycles of enthusiasm and coming back. On the negative side, I think for this protracted 2-year period, the OLLI lifelong learning community and the River Road community has lost that vital sense of wanting to be together in person in community, partially because we've had the technology that we could rely on with comforts in our home of tapping into the internet to order food. Plus the disturbing factor is that in protecting our own health, we've kind of built this shield up that we don't feel compelled to go out and be with one another. We're cautious. And I think for the OLLI community of adult learners, especially people in their later 70s and 80s with mobility issue, they're not going to want to reconnect. And we have to find, like we're doing at River Road now, having a online service as well as in person is the reality for the future. But that, I guess, is also the positive in the yin and yang, that we can serve a larger community based on individual needs each day.
And I'll just add sort of more personally, at the beginning of the pandemic, I started writing this book that we've been speaking from, and it really called me to ask, well, what is this about? So I had the opportunity, since I was at home anyway, to do some deeper writing, and it was so nurturing for me. I just relished having this quiet time, where normally, being an extrovert, I would have been really frustrated that I was not out and about more. But I so valued this quiet time to be able to write. And really, I write because I want to question my deeper thinking and trying to understand, how I see things and how I want to share things. But also for me, the technology with Zoom, I have spoken at more international conferences and webinars and done things I never would have thought possible, connected with people in many countries. That has been really eye-opening. I will say too, I've noticed maybe on a negative side in taking some OLLI classes online, I now can't concentrate very long. I check my email about every 2 minutes. It's terrible. I don't like that part. It's harder for me to focus longer in listening to a class or a talk than I used to be able to, because I'm so used to being able to multitask. So I have to overcome that little challenge. But I don't know. So it's had a variety, obviously feeling frustrated that we haven't been able to do more. But Carl and I are risk takers, and we've actually traveled overseas 3 times. So we haven't interpreted this as being chained to our house. So how do you see it? And love to hear how anybody else.
And same with the others as well. This is a nice time to share our views. Go ahead, Christina.
No, I was going to ask others.
Okay, great.
Who would like to share? How did you view this? Was it a positive, negative? What did you learn, Loretta?
I will. Actually, the fact of being at home and connected by Zoom has had 2, both positive and negative. One, I can be connected, and the positive of that is I don't have to run around like a fool like I used to, because part of my job and part of my organizational activities had me going from event to event, sometimes all 5 nights a week and on the weekend. So I don't have that. But the negative, of course, is that you don't get that human interaction that I really like.
Mm-hmm. Jennifer.
Hi.
Hi.
It's great to see you, and thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It was very thought-provoking, and I liked the way it went into all the different aspects of how the pandemic affected us beyond the sickness and health, and really gave me something to think about. So the way that I experienced the pandemic is very interesting in retrospect, because I actually felt like it gave me permission just to stop and not to have to run here and there and do this and that. Because actually, if I was doing that, then I would be endangering myself and others. So it was it was a good thing. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I used to like love going on my weekly trips to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. I look forward to it. I would go find out what the senior hours were. And it was like a big outing for me. And so I guess in that category, I would put rediscovering the simpler pleasures of life. Also, it made me grateful because I knew, or I believed, that my being closed up in my house was a temporary thing, and that there would be a time when I would be able to go out again. And so I actually, it gave me a certain amount of gratitude that I felt safe, and I felt, grateful for having a home and just, the simple things. I mean, I even stopped getting upset about the fact that my home didn't look the way I wanted it to. For the most part. So I thought it was pretty good. I couldn't travel. That was bad. And then at a certain point last summer, I came down with a back problem, which just made it even more difficult for me. But by the same token, I said, well, this is not going to last forever. This is going to go away. So never mind. Well, on the downside, I have a 14-year-old granddaughter who lives with me, and she was with another relative family member for a number of months. But basically, it was very hard on her. It was really hard because, at that point in time in life, you are really trying to discover who you are. You need to have interaction with others. And there is a tendency that, even normally, that you want to just hide away and you want to just be, alone. Well, with the pandemic and with the technology, that became a way of life. And really, I've heard this saying, when I'm alone inside my mind, I'm in a dangerous place. That can be true. So even though she finally did go back to school, I think she and many, many young people have a long way to go to get back into finding themselves and finding their way. And I think growing up has been given an extra bump in the road, which we can only hope that will be smoothed out as time goes by.
Yeah, exactly. We mentioned that too as a big concern about K through 12 students, but thanks for sharing, Jennifer. I just want to add one thing, and then I'd love to hear from someone else. I think something Reverend Nancy said a while ago that has stuck with me is that none of us could have imagined living in a lockdown and isolation for 2 years, and we've all done it. We've all figured it out. So the question is, what else can we do that we can't imagine doing? It's such a great question. I think about that a lot. So anyone else want to share? Dale, I'm going to call on you. Do you want to? Yes.
And Mary Lou,
okay.
you too, if you wish.
So two things happened that were very interesting. First of all, the choir continued to meet throughout the summer, which we never would have done. And we did it simply for check-in. In other words, I think we got to know each other better during the COVID than we ever did during our little tea break when we went to choir rehearsal. So I believe we became more of a community during these Zoom check-ins. And although I personally hated the individual singing that got blended electronically, I think the congregation appreciated it, but I didn't enjoy hearing myself as a lone voice. The other thing that happened is my husband's sisters, he has 4 sisters, and one was in UK up until Brexit, and then she and COVID, and then she fled for her life for both reasons to Spain. Anyway, his 4 sisters get together on Zoom every 2 weeks, which it's a little bit too frequent for me, but even so, it's very nice. I mean, we got to know each other better, and actually there's one sister missing because there's ill will between her and other sisters, but we make up for it. We call her separately. But you know, they managed to keep up very well. And I wish that my family had been able to do it. We have a budding PhD in IT nephew who should have been able to arrange it, but somehow we didn't have the will in my family. But
well, I mean, Zoom still exists, and we can now, now that we know how to use it, we can keep using it in so many creative ways. That's the good news.
It's only Tanya, you've just joined in.
And probably
what we're doing here
we're
is
just
we're
ending.
we're concluding our 1 hour, so I'm not sure whether.
But it's being recorded, so
but-
you can listen to the
Yes, but what
recording.
we're sharing is our own personal experiences now that we've lived through 2 years, both the negative and positive, if you wanted to add in, or
if Mary Lou or
Mary
anybody
Lou.
else wanted to add in,
Or Christina, back to you. Did you want to
although
share?
it's time, but
We're okay, we can,
but if anybody
we're
else would like
permitted to
to
go
share,
on. But,
or it's over. Anybody else want to share how it's been for them?
another aspect about how Dale, the community stayed together with the choir, Jennifer and Kim and about 6 or 7 other, mainly river roaders, have had a small group for about 3 or 4 years on jazz appreciation. And I would come at a guest was rotating at people's homes, and then March 2020 hit. And then within a month, they were back live. But what I found on Zoom, but what I found as a definite positive, because they would rotate every month, they'd raise their hand, okay, in May, I will take the topic, and then they would find a jazz era or musician, David Brubeck, etc. But month by month, the quality of these lead presentations was phenomenal, almost that they could be uploaded on YouTube. And I've talked to Kim about maybe an Ollie course with what's already been recorded, if not redoing them with the research and what you've just done recently, because we've all learned tech skills that we're, quote, one of the 50 million content producers in the world that the young people say they are. We've created content today for this CCNC presentation. Remember Loretta and Dale and Kim? We had a committee meeting 2 years ago that said, again, we cannot go and record our videos because the privacy will be lost by our guests. They might feel awkward, that they might not want to present because what they're saying may be recorded. That's history. We are all now recorded, more or less, and we live with it, right? So we've shifted.
Yeah.
So we have. So any final comments? Or Loretta, did you want to say anything in closing?
No, this was a great presentation. Just remind everyone we have another one 2 weeks from now on spirituality and nature.
Yeah.
And you will record this and post it on
Facebook, our Facebook page.
What is that Facebook page? How do they
Dallas
find it?
Connections.
It's not. Well, I will post the link. So I upload it to YouTube, which is Coffee Conversation and Controversy, and then I post that link on Facebook group called Contemporary Issues Forum, CCNC, Coffee Conversation and Controversy, and then there's also a Chalice Connections Facebook group. I post the link on there.
Oh, great, thank you. Jennifer, do you have a quick final
And
comment?
Christina?
I do. Since we're mentioning a couple of groups that we're meeting online, I have to say that one of our members, Ursula Scott, has been like a champion in getting widows and widowers group together twice a week for a long time. And that has done wonders for people, because there are some people that really can't get out that easily. I mean, one of our members is 98, and it has been a godsend, and it's gotten us to know one another very, very well. Thank you.
Great.
And Christina, one final comment from
No,
you?
I just wanted to say that I feel this was a terrific session. I'm so grateful for tech, but also last semester in Ollie, the hybrid class on the human body, to be with human beings in a class once a week. I just gave them a bunch of money. I was so grateful.
Great. And you and I sat in that class while Kim was home online participating as well.
And look,
I
I
watched your
hybrid
face.
model,
I
right?
could, yeah, I could see that. Isn't it just it's a new world. So I thank you both. I guess on behalf of everybody, this was really thought-provoking.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for attending.
Thank-
And if you want to hear any of it, there'll be a recording. So thank you, Loretta.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
all.
Have a great day. All righty.